Well, welcome into ClearView Live. We're so excited you have joined us today, whether you're watching on Facebook Live or YouTube or maybe just listening to the podcast, man. We're thrilled to have you joining us today. Pastor Jason is with me, and today we're continuing on our conversation, talking kind of through Jesus on the Street, this whole sermon series that our church has been walking through called How Did Jesus Handle certain topics, certain things that you and I will face in our everyday life. And this week's a little bit different because we had a guest speaker in with us this past Sunday, Dr. Ronnie Floyd from the SBC Executive Committee, longtime pastor of Cross Church in Northwest Arkansas. And so
Small church.
Exactly. Yeah, he did well. He did okay. He did what he could. Pastor Ronnie talked through how Jesus handled prayer and fasting, and specifically kind of honed in on Jesus' communication with the Father and how we can model ourselves after that. And he honestly, man, he's just got this gift of saying things exactly the way you need to hear it. And he's just super gifted in that way. And one of the things that got my mind kind of rolling in on this, it hit me right between the eyes, and I think we talked about it earlier. You said the same thing, was in dealing with prayer. He said this, a lot of people are good to talk about the shepherd, but not many will really talk to the shepherd. We'll talk about the Lord, we'll talk about God, but we won't really talk to God as much. And so for you, Pastor Jason, you mapping out this sermon series, mapping out what topics need to be hit. Why was prayer so significant for you? The communion with the Father, not just about things we know about God, but things we know with God and community with Him.
Prayer's hard. Prayer's not easy, and it's the dominant theme of Jesus' life: communication with the Father. Lily Tomlin, who obviously predates your generation, but I was young. I was in my teens when I first encountered. She was a stand-up comedian in the 70s and 80s, and she was in movies. But she said something one time I've never forgotten. She said, "Why is it that when we talk to God, it's called prayer, and when God talks to us, it's called schizophrenia?" And she's not even a believer, but it was just interesting to me that there's a communion aspect. And so I asked Ronnie to preach on this because fasting and prayer have, as a man, not just as the CEO of this global entity we call the Southern Baptist Convention, he practices that. Ronnie does. And I thought, man, I want him to come in here and talk about that. Yeah. It's for people to hear it from somebody other than me, because a lot of people, if they go to ClearView, or they may think, I talk a lot about prayer, and we do a lot of things here to bake in prayer to our rhythm of our church. But that's not something I've done my whole life. That's something that in the last maybe 7 to 8 years of my life has become a new rhythm for me, a deeper, transcendent, to talk with God more and live in the Spirit more. And I think a lot of people want to know more about it, but they don't know a lot about it, therefore they don't do it.
Why do you think that we it's a natural struggle for believers in prayer? Why do you think that there's this? You mentioned you started thinking, and I agree with you. Prayer's hard. Mm-hmm. So help me understand, and kind of, I know what I think, but what do you? Why is it so counterintuitive? Why does it feel so I don't know, difficult maybe is the word?
I think one, I think for the most part, you don't hear God talk back in an audible voice. You don't hear, okay, sure, Jason.
Right. It's not a conversation like you and me are sitting here.
No, it's a different wavelength. And so
it requires patience.
It requires a lot of things, but one of the first things it requires is for you to slow your life down long enough to do it.
Exactly.
And that's
that in and of itself is counter.
That's why I preached the first sermon on hurry.
Right.
Because hurry is the enemy of your communion with God. Yeah. It is the enemy of. You have an enemy called the devil, but he uses a hurried lifestyle to short circuit you. And Ronnie, one of the things you mentioned, Graham said, Ronnie made the comment, so many people are content to do ministry without the power of God, or something to that effect.
Yeah.
And he's exactly right. I heard Billy Graham once, I read a quote where Billy Graham, this was a long time ago, a long time ago, but he said something to the effect of, if the Holy Spirit left the church today, most Christians would, and most churches would move forward unaware and unaffected.
Mm.
And he is very much true.
Yeah.
Because if you look at the way we do a lot of churches and the way we do church now, it's very much more of a organizational mindset.
Yeah.
Because you need organization.
Right. Yeah.
But there's no spiritual fuel behind it. And so prayer is tough because it requires you to have a different appetite. And
it forces you into a different speed.
You
like
do.
You mentioned.
You absolutely do.
Yeah, it's not something that you can just. I know for me growing up, like I thought it was just like an obligation. You know, it was like as a teenager,
Say
like,
prayers.
like you just gotta say you pray before you eat.
Well, think about this. Think about how most people. If you listen to how most people pray, this was something that Henry Blackaby, when I was 19, when I first encountered experiencing God. I think that's roughly the year it came out.
Yeah.
So that's roughly what, 28 years ago.
35. I'm just kidding.
28 years ago, and he said something that even in my 19-year-old mind, I was like, wow, I do that. He said most of the way, I'm paraphrasing, but he said most of the way people pray is they say, God, this is what I'm going to do. Now I would like for you to bless it. Yeah. Meaning, it's where he said, look for where God's at work and join him. God doesn't join you, you join God.
Right. Exactly.
And I thought, it's true. If you think about most of the way we pray, God bless this, God bless that, put your hand on my family, bless my kids, bless my work, God, thank you for everything. Really, that's not even praying. That sounds kind of harsh. It's really not praying to say, God, I need you to bless this, I need you to bless that, God bless this, God bless that.
To-do list.
Yeah, and bless that. But what you're really saying is, I'm going to do these things. Right. It doesn't matter if you're telling me not to. I'm going to do them.
Jump in the truck.
So I need you to get in the truck with me and ride down the road. And Jesus didn't do that. Jesus' life was about alignment. And that is why prayer is hard. Because prayer forces you, if you look in, I've been working through a rhythm out of Jesus' model prayer. When he literally starts praying to God and he says, Our Father who is in heaven, hallowed be thy name. There is a structure there. And the first thing he does is submit. Mm-hmm. And so every day, in the last month or two, I've been working through kind of a flow down a shelf, working through what he prayed for. And the first thing I do is submit myself to a God's kingdom calling. That's an alignment of where I'm following him. He's not co-partnering with me.
Yeah. God is not my co-pilot.
He is not.
Exactly.
He is. Yeah. And it's hard. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, there's something interesting I think is natural to me for sure, but I don't think I'm alone. I think it's just the world at large that we desire to make impact in our lives. The impact that,
I don't know anybody that wants to be a nobody.
Exactly. And we all have just this innate and natural, and I believe God-given desire to be used in a certain way. And Ronnie said something Sunday that, man, for me, and listening back, it like stopped me. Like I had to hit the back 15 seconds thing and hear it again. And he said, I won't get it wrong, he said, you will never have God do anything greater through you than he is not already doing in you.
Yeah, I wrote that as fast as I could, and it really rattled me.
Yeah, it shook me. I was like, oh, good grief. Because I think to that end, with impact, we all desire, whether it's a platform or some sort of way that we're used in this world, whether it's in ministry or just in our everyday life. But the fact of the matter is very simply, as Pastor Ronnie said, man, it's got to start inward. It's living inside out and not outside in. What are you thinking about that?
I want to say that again because I want to make sure people didn't run right past it. Ronnie said this, God will never do anything through you that is greater than anything he's doing in you. And you need to think through that because we live in a world where we measure everything by externals. Mm-hmm. In fact, I've even been convicted at ClearView. If you look back, Brian Hatcher and I were talking about this not long ago. When I came up in my 20s and going to seminary, I don't know that it's ever been measured any other way with churches. How big's the church? What's their budget?
Right.
How many baptisms?
How many do you run?
How many do you run? Yeah. What do you run? And that is a pastor's way of looking at you going, where are you in reference to me? Yeah. And so here's the two things I can't control. And it's the two ways we measure the health of the church. What's the attendance? And what's the budget? A bigger budget than this year than versus last year. If we grow in the budget, we must be growing. And if we grow in attendance, we must be doing something right. Well, by those two standards, a heretic can do that. He can. There's churches all over this nation that are full of heresy, like blatant, have a lot of money, and they can't build buildings big enough.
Yeah.
So what does it mean then? So Jesus didn't measure. And this is something, and I'm not joking, Graham. This is something that I have really thought about a lot. I just don't know what to do about it yet. Jesus spent the vast majority of his public ministry with 12 men, walking down a dirt road to town. By most people's standards, that was a colossal waste of talent.
Yeah, that's true.
A colossal waste of talent. You're the Son of God that can heal the world. Physically, your arm's broke, zap. Not anymore. You're hungry, whammo. Here's 5,000 fishes and loaves. I mean, it was magic by people's standards, right? Yeah. And he's like, no, I don't want to do a lot of that. I'd rather walk with you guys. And we're still talking about him today.
Right.
Now, nobody's talking, think about how few people are talking about Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs changed the world as I know it.
Yeah.
He changed the music industry. When people think about the iPhone, Steve Jobs physically, we live in Nashville area. Steve Jobs physically changed music forever.
Yeah. You
don't even buy stuff anymore. You buy air.
That's true.
And you don't hear his name that much. And, it's fascinating. We're still talking about a man 2,000 plus years later who spent most of his life talking to God, walking with 12 dudes.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't sell.
Right.
It doesn't sell in the land of churches that are big or must be strong. And so I think when you look at the power of God, that's been my heart for ClearView, and it's been really my heart way before ClearView,
right.
Experiencing the power of God and the presence of God, not just this big old awesome place that tends to get bigger every year and because it's cool. Who cares? And I want to experience the power of God. And Ronnie Floyd has created that. So fasting is what he brought up, because fasting is something that, this is really interesting to me. When you look at most of the Bible, let's take Old Testament and New. Fasting was kind of the standard.
Right.
It's what you did.
It's a rhythm.
Yes, you did it a lot. In today's Christian world, you don't even hear about it. And people look at you funny like, why are you doing that? Yeah. Oh, it's just because our appetites have changed. What used to be the radical, or what used to be the standard, is now the radical. Yeah. What used to be the standard is now the radical. Right. And so fasting is something that the typical Hebrew fast was 1 day. And fasting is very simple. You're going without food because you want something else more. Yeah. I want to hear from God so bad. Not that I want God to do something, or I may, but I need to hear from Him so bad I'm willing to give up food to do that instead.
Yeah. To reallocate, repurpose the time that I would have spent eating or going to a lunch with someone or whatever. I'm
going to feed differently. And Ronnie did make a great point. In the Bible, fasting is going without food. There are people that are like, well, I'm fasting from music for a day. Oh, okay, that's fine. I mean, or I'm fasting because it's Lent. I'm fasting from a certain food,
soda, or whatever it may be. Yeah.
Well, maybe. It's pretty easy for me to go without coffee. I mean, I love it, but I can go without it. It's no big deal. The whole point of a fast is that
it costs
you something to stop your life, walk over to another corner, sit with God for a minute, and talk about that. If you're going to give up coffee, if you're going on what we call a Daniel fast, then you need to not just, I'm just going to not do it. Well, that's just really discipline's all that is. If I have enough discipline, then I can do that. That's not the point. Now, there is definitely something to people giving up their phones, giving up social media. I heard a theologian not long ago say, I'm going to get this wrong, but he made something like this. When we get to heaven and we're held accountable for prayerlessness, in the light of social media, we won't have many excuses. And he was saying basically the hours we spend mindlessly scrolling versus talking to God. It's not that social media is bad. It's not that the phone is bad. It's that we feast on things other than talking to God. And Jesus' priority in his life was talking communion with the Father. And there were times he even went without food because he wanted his communion that bad. So I think it comes down to fasting is about reorienting your life. And for you, it may be one of those things that you can just fast a meal, like a lunch.
Right. Yeah, I know for me, I'd done those, whenever our church growing up would do an initiative where we would, as a church fast for a day or something. I would do that as a teenager, but it wasn't until, honestly, a few years ago, or maybe about a little over a year ago now, where my wife and I really experienced a need that we just felt from the Lord to fast. And honestly, Jason, that was in our prayers through coming here to ClearView and kind of how God was beginning to weave our story and
clear your mind out.
Yeah, and to move us and prepare us, we felt like, for whatever may be next. And I'd received a phone call from one of our church members that was on our team that brought us here that just kind of prompted us to think, okay, is this from the Lord, or is this just another another opportunity that may or may not be ours? And so for us, we just committed for a whole day. I did, and Catherine did in her own way too, and we just committed to give up, like you said, what was consuming us in order to be consumed by something else, and that was super revealing for us. And honestly, I'll tell you exactly where I was driving to Memphis from Georgia for a different event that I literally drove through Nashville as I had received this email the previous day, and I just began to fast that whole day. And even that evening gave up 24 hours worth of just praying as I drove. And the Lord just revealed so much to me about what he was about to do. It was that moment in the Old Testament where, the Lord tells one of the prophets, I'm doing something in your day you know nothing about.
Yeah.
And for me, that was the moment of you have no idea what's coming, and so you better get ready. And man, that was super impactful for me. And just every time my stomach growled, every time my mind went to, I would just pass another Taco Bell, you know what I mean? Or whatever it was, like I was prompted to think, man, I'm going to spend time with the Lord here. It was just super huge for me.
It's a standard, and Ronnie made a good point. Jesus said, when you fast, not if you do.
Yeah.
We are expected to do that.
Yeah.
We are expected to spend time with the Father. And I've done different types of fasts. I've done 1 days many times. I've done 3 days several times. I've done, I think, 2 7-day fasts. It's really, I've never done a 40. That's a big one. It's a big thought. But most people's bodies don't recover.
It's like a 5K versus a marathon. It feels like,
or 3.
Yeah.
But I would say this to you. I can tell you, as somebody that does fast occasionally and has done some extended fasts, you will begin to hear things. You will begin to see things. Things will float to the surface. But I will tell you this, and this is something that Ronnie Floyd did point out, which I thought was monumental, and people may have walked right past it if you go back and listen to the sermon, but don't walk past it. Fasting is always done with a purpose. It's not depriving yourself of food.
Yeah.
He used
diet plan.
He used a great example of Ezra. Ezra was praying. Basically, what Ezra did is he told the foreign government, we don't need your help, God is enough. And then he went to God and said, hey, I kind of wrote a check on you, and I need you to kind of have some money on the bank, so would you mind covering this? Because actually I don't have the money for it.
Right.
And so, which I love the vulnerability of that. He's like, I'm not going to let anybody speak. God, I don't even need y'all. God's big. It's like playground talk. I don't even need y'all.
Yeah. Well, my dad can beat up your dad.
Yeah, exactly. And then he goes to God and says, hey, by the way, but he fasted, and God delivered. It gets God's attention when you want to hear him that bad. I've got 2 boys, and if they start coming to me, Daddy, talk to me, Dad, grab me, Dad, look at me, Dad, talk to me, I'm listening. I'm going to listen. They're going to get my attention. So it's always done with a purpose. And I would say this as we close it up. I would say something to you about fasting and prayer in general is about reorienting your life. And it's hard for me. It's hard because I'm hyper by nature. I know that I'm hyper. I do. And I would say a couple things to you. A couple things to hopefully alleviate some guilt here. I read a lot. And I've always read a lot in my ministry years. And I try to mix it up, old stuff, new stuff. I try to do, old prophets, new business stuff, new marketing stuff. I read a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
I just believe in growing your mind. I really do. But I always make sure I read a lot in the spiritual realm, the spiritual disciplines, fasting, prayer, how to commune with God. Been reading through Ian Bounds recently on the power of prayer. But every time I read about people, man, I mean, going back to the days of the Scotland revival and, in Hebrides Islands and places like that, you will hear about these people that prayed an hour or two a day for most of their life. And every time I read that, I feel small, I feel inadequate, and I feel like, I really just don't love God enough. And these people love God more than me. Well, the truth is, everybody I've ever known that's an intercessor, that's what they do. They pray. I preach, they pray. I lead, they pray. They're content with that. They don't need the world to know about them. They don't have any interest in it. If they can come into a room while somebody's in a worship service and pray for 2 hours and feel like, did it, baby. I mean, it was a win.
Yeah.
I would lose my mind, I think, at 2 hours trying to pray. So I would say, number one, never compare yourself to anybody, because I've done that. And it's not, you will lose that battle. I would say to you, start somewhere. So if you want to go deeper with the Lord, don't go nutso and start, I'm going to fast 1 day a week. You'll hit a wall.
Yeah.
Here's what I would suggest. Start, this is what I did back in college. I always had a problem with, I'd pray early in the morning, and that's it. And I was going through a season. In fact, I think it was Michelle had broken up with me. That'll get your attention. Mm-hmm. When, in my senior year of high school, my senior year of college, she, lost her mind there for about 10 months. And don't edit that. That needs to stay in there. Okay.
That's all the time we have.
But I really wanted to hear from the Lord. Obviously.
And from Michelle.
And I wanted her to hear from God. And then I told her, I remember one time in the library at college telling her, you're not listening to God. And I walked off.
There's a difference between praying for someone and praying for someone.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I'm like, listen, I told her, you're losing your mind. I did one time. That didn't. But it worked. I married her. And
all's well that ends well.
That's right. Yeah. So, but I knew I needed to hear from God different. And I don't know what made me think about this, but I tried it and it worked. Haven't really done it since. But there's an old hymn, Sweet Hour of Prayer. And that comes from, actually, it's an old hymn. You don't even hear it in church anymore, but Sweet Hour of Prayer. The hour of prayer, that phrase comes from the monastic orders when monks, when they would hear the bell at the monastery, dong, dong, and hear it go off, that they would spend at the top of the hour, they'd spend the first 60 seconds praying. The idea was to align them, to actually get them back on course. So that's where that phrase comes from. And one day I had the idea, you know what I'm going to do? Every time I hit a traffic light, when I come to a red light, I'm going to keep my eyes open and I'm going to pray until it turns green. About whatever's next. If I'm going into a class, I was a senior in college, if I'm going into a class, I was a student pastor, if I've got a thing at church, whatever is on my mind when I hit that red light, that's what I'm praying about. And I did it for like a couple of weeks. And then I quit. But what it was amazing to me was how that simple exercise reoriented me to walking in the Spirit. Now, what that exercise did do in 1995, what that did do was it has never left me. I pray multiple times a day. They're usually short, sometimes a sentence or two.
Yeah.
But it keeps me, as what Paul says, walking in the Spirit. And you will not fulfill the lust of the flesh. Right? So, I would say...
It's not a perfect analogy, but for me it's also, it's the same way that I talk to my wife throughout the day.
Yeah.
It may not be that I call her and we have a 45-minute conversation at 2 in the afternoon, but it's quick, hey, just checking on you kind of thing. And I know that's not perfect, but it's a similar, just a quick update, quick
constant communion. And I think it's the way. I think it's... And so what I would say to you is, if you want to go deeper with the Lord, you do need to fast. Start with a simple meal. You could try a Daniel fast, lay down your phone for 2 days. don't pick it up, whatever. But start somewhere with the purpose of alignment. And that's a purpose in and of itself. Hey, God, I'm not fasting over a big burden. What I'm fasting over is I want to know you more.
Right.
So I'm going to fast and I'm going to go deeper with the Lord. So what I would say is if you haven't listened to Rodney Floyd's sermon, do that. And on top of that, if you really, if this helps you, I would say share it. Share it with your community of friends, because God wants to do more in you than he does. He can affect things on the outside. He's interested in your transformation. He really is. So go deep with him on that, and I'm telling you, everything else will be added to you, as Jesus said.
That's good. That's good, Pastor. Thanks so much for jumping in with me here. Thank you to Pastor Ronnie Floyd for how he led us so faithfully and well this past weekend. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you again next week.